Good afternoon, everyone. We will be getting started at this time. Welcome everyone to the webinar hosted by USABO and USABO Club presidents. We're so excited to have so many people tune into the event, and we hope you're looking forward to the great experience today, just as much as we are. So today we will be talking about the main steps to setting up a USABO Club, as well as hear advice from multiple presidents throughout the country. And from this webinar, you will be able to learn how to set up a community at your school where students can get together and learn biology together. My name is Leanne Tai, and I will be hosting today's webinar. We are so honored to have Mrs. Kathy Frame, the advisor and consultant of USABO, to guide us today. We're also very happy to have our guest speakers, Nathan Parson, a USABO team alum and Clements Biology Olympiad president, Ezra Satyar and Bhavya Guduru, captains of Thomas Jefferson Biology Olympiad, and Shaya president of Portola Biology Olympiad. We're very excited to share our knowledge and experiences, so let's get started. Just as a quick overview, we will be starting off with explaining the USABO competition and move into some of the main steps of starting a USABO club. We will be sharing some resources as well as be providing some advice throughout the presentation. And afterwards, our panelists, who all were or are USABO Club presidents, will be giving their take on leading a USABO Club. And we will be ending with a Q&A session. So feel free to send in questions throughout the webinar, and we will answer them according to the time available at the very end. But be sure to put the questions in the Q&A box instead of the chat. So let's get started with the USABO itself, as presented by Mrs. Kathy Frame. And Mrs. Frame is a lifetime educator who has worked with the USABO when it was run by students at Harvard in the 90s. And the Center for Excellence in Education started its sponsorship in 2002, and she continued to contribute to the program. And from 2009 until 2018, she served as director and now serve as a USABO consultant and advisor. And the students who participate in the USABO are an inspiration to her for their passion for biology. So let's welcome Mrs. Frame.
Thank you very much, Leanne. USABO is near and dear to my heart. It's for all you students that are passionate about biology. Those that are gifted, those that just love biology in any form or whatever. It's part of an international network. We're part of the International Biology Olympiad. And that contains 85 countries that participate as well. The whole idea is for you to learn as much as possible about biology and pursue what you're interested in. The competition itself, as many of you know, is a 4-tier competition. We have an open exam, and last year we had 8,500 students, which was quite good for the COVID. The semifinal exam is for 600 students, and last year we had 550. And then of course the culminating event is the top students from that semifinal exam that come to national finals and compete to become part of the USA Biolympiad team that goes to the International Biology Olympiad, which will be held in Armenia this year. Yazeta, Armenia, all right, in July.
Thank you, Mrs. Frame. That was a great introduction to this seminar. And I'm sure most of you are here because you're interested in not only the USABO competition, but some of the audience might also be interested in how to set up a USABO club. So setting up this club is a great way to encourage students to not only participate in the amazing competition, but also explore biology as a potential career path. And today we would like to share our experiences and knowledge on how to do so. So I will start with the main steps on how to set up a USABO club, and we will be going over how to start your club if your school doesn't already have one, how to bring in activities, and most importantly, motivating the members. So the first thing you would need to do in order to run a club is to start it, especially if your school does not already have this type of club. And it is important to identify a goal before starting a USABO club, because a club will function differently based on its goals and missions. So are you aiming to create a club to provide practice and resources, or one that will help students explore the field of biology? But in the end, by defining your goal, you will be able to better plan your activities and gain support from the adult supervisor. And speaking of this supervisor, one of the required steps in the USABO is to have an advisor, even if your school does not require an advisor for every club. And oftentimes, teachers at school may be limited to the number of clubs they can manage, or students feel more comfortable with some teachers than others. So this advisor does not have to be a biology teacher, but you can also work with a biology teacher in addition to your advisor if that makes you feel more comfortable. And the advisor just needs to be someone who is willing to register the school and proctor the exam. And other than registering and proctoring, you can discuss with your advisor to see if they can provide resources or advice. For instance, a teacher may be able to allow you to use your room or help you print reading resources or let you use the equipment in their classroom. But these are all based on the availability of your advisor and the communication between you and the adult. But again, it is important to have an advisor that not only registers the school, but they must also proctor the exam based on the USABO Honor Code. And talking about registering. Registering is the most important part to participate in the competition because if you aren't registered correctly, you will not be able to take the exam. And after your advisor has registered the school as either a new school or as a returning school, and this is important to make sure that the right button is selected if you're a new or returning school, each student will need to be individually registered. And sometimes this is by the students themselves, or the advisor can do it, the advisor if they have all these students' information. So it is important to make sure that you select the correct high school in the listing because sometimes students select the wrong school when there are multiple high schools with the same name. So be sure to check the location of the school in the drop-down menu when you're registering. And one last registration process that needs to be completed before taking the exam is registering on AOPS, which will be coming in January. And this registration will allow you to be signed up on the test taking platform so that you can actually take this test itself. And something else we wanted to mention is fundraising, because there's a registration fee that is required in order to become part of the competition. You can plan some activities to raise money to not only spread the word about your club, but also this will also allow the students at your school to actually compete. And so starting a club will require a team of great minds to contribute to ideas and manage the club. And by dividing up the management, each board member or officer can then focus on making a small part of the club as best as possible. So here are just some examples of roles you can include in your club, such as president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, teaching coordinator, webmaster, marketing director, and more. But a lot of times, this is based on what your school might require of a club or what is needed to run the club. And it is also important to have a group with good teamwork skills so that the communication between the members can be effective and efficient. So here, we would like to invite a very knowledgeable USABO Club President, Nathan Parson, to talk about his experiences with the beginning steps of setting up a USABO club. So let's welcome Nathan.
Hello, thank you, Leanne, for introducing me. I'm Nathan. I was a USABO alumni finals for the past couple of years and then eventually went to IBO. So I started a USABO club my junior year of high school. And there's a lot of things that I had to learn, particularly with finding an advisor and making sure that the club was registered and all those things. So I guess this kind of depends on your school's individual process. I highly recommend reaching out to people that you know that have previously started clubs to see if there's like any hiccups that you might find in the process, because there are deadlines and all those sorts of things that you need to keep track of. As far as planning goes, it was really helpful for me to have a meeting with a group of officers. So I would recommend trying to find officers, or maybe at least one or two people that you know would be a good fit for the club, that have previous experience and that you can work well with. And then discussing with them, what do you think the best outline of the club will look like? Because like Leanne said, it's really important to understand what the goals of the club are, whether it's mainly instructional or if you're just aimed at doing activities. The way that I personally did it was to more go for instruction, because I thought instruction would be more useful for the population that was at my school. And I think that that fit pretty well with what people were looking for. So that's just my general recommendations for starting a club.
Thank you so much, Nathan, for sharing his amazing advice. We will be hearing even more from Nathan at the end of the webinar. So the next main portion of, so the next main portion of forming a club is spreading word about it so that more people can get to know about your club. And join as a member. So you can use a variety of platforms to advertise and encourage people to join. One of the most effective ways I have realized is actually just talking to people directly. So whether it's talking to teachers or talking to students, this will allow people to give you their full attention as you're describing to them the opportunities the club can provide. And some schools also have club fairs or club rush. So you can take advantage of these opportunities to tell people about your club. And another good way to reach people quickly and on a large scale is through posts, so whether they're physical or digital. For example, you can put up paper posters at your school or put up social media posts to keep the community engaged and informed of your activities. And this will likely get you new members who are interested, especially targeting the students at your school. And you might know that in today's world, technology and social media may be the easiest way to spread information about your club and gather members. So we highly encourage you to try out social media as a way to spread word. And here, we would like to invite Shaya, who is another USABO Club president, to talk a bit about her experiences with promoting the Biolympiad Club at her school. So let's welcome Shaya.
Hi, so my name is Shaya and I'm the president of the USABO Club in Portola High School, which is in Irvine, California. And I've also been on the board in the past. So I think Leanne covered a lot of it. So we do a lot of things that she covered. We have an Instagram account for our club. And in the past, our board members have promoted it and we have a lot of followers on that. So that's how we update people for like when our club meetings are and things like that. We also hang up a lot of posters around our school, and these posters have like where to follow our Instagram, our email, so how to contact us, and it also has a link to a tiny URL and a QR code that'll take them to a Google form, and if they fill that out, they'll be on our email list. And email is primarily how we contact our members, so that's super important. And like Leanne mentioned, we also do like a club kickoff. And that's actually where we get like a lot of our interest. Like we always participate in that, like we have in the past. And we just put like our QR code and people sign up and they join our contact list. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Shreya. That was very, very helpful. I think so. We will also be able to hear from Shreya at the end during the guest speaker segment. So we can look forward to that. And let me wait for the... Okay. So once you have your club set up, your club activities are going to be what keeping your students engaged and willing to learn more about this amazing topic of biology. So here are just a few ideas on what you can incorporate into your club. Depending on what you want to aim for, like Nathan said earlier, your club may benefit from regular meetings where you can go over things like biology content, instruction, or recent research, fun games, or just anything you think that will engage the students. And you can familiarize the students with the structure, like the 4-tier structure, and the topics of the exam rules, the timing, how many questions, especially if there are new students who have never been exposed to this competition before. You can also take some time to explain how each tier works and what will be appearing, like what types of biology questions will be appearing on the exam. So to do this, you can consider if you want to provide resources and practice to help the students feel more comfortable with the content. And to make the meetings and club more interesting, you can also implement some activities such as interactive games or special speaker events with professionals or USABO alums, volunteer events, fundraising events, hands-on labs, mock exams, and more. So from some of the clubs that we have talked to, speaker events seems to be very encouraging because students are able to hear directly from and ask questions to those who have succeeded and will be more motivated to study with a goal in mind. But in the end, it is up to your team to decide what activities to include because this is where your club can be unique. So one of the most essential aspects of a club is maintaining motivated students. And we know that the USABO is the most, or probably one of the most prestigious biology competitions in the nation. So without motivation, many students will tend to give up. And you can help maintain this interest by introducing club activities like we mentioned earlier, especially the guest speaker events to inspire and encourage the students. And in many clubs, they invite past finalists or IBO contestants to talk a bit about their journey and just directly converse with the students. And teamwork and studying together is also another great way to keep the students motivated. And here are just a few pictures from clubs throughout the nation. You can see that through both in-person and virtual events, many students are able to come together and study through amazing experiences. And we're very excited to see various clubs and many more clubs blossom throughout the country. And before we move on, we will be hearing from Isra, who will be talking a bit about her experiences with club activities. So let's welcome Isra.
Yeah, thank you so much, Leanne. On the note of motivation that Leanne ended on, I do think because USABO is such a competitive competition, and I think sometimes at TJ, the school I go to, it's hyper competitive itself. And so I think making sure kids are motivated through collaboration is really the best way to do that. So that's really the platform I ran on for Captain, is to make it a much more collaborative environment than competitive. And so what we're doing for that is TJ actually has a lot of other clubs. So Biology Olympiad is collaborating with a lot of other clubs. For example, Chemistry Olympiad, we're collaborating with Neuros Society, and we have an ethics bowl to study the ethics of biology, such as genetic engineering and all that stuff. And so working with other clubs, we bring, we kind of get the audience of both clubs. And so that also spreads interest and information. Another thing we do is Friday after school meetings, which is every single Friday for around 2 hours after school, we meet up and we print out practice tests. And all the members can take a practice test for an hour. And then we all bring food and everything, and we go over the practice test after that. So people also get that mock type of test where you're timed and everything. Another thing we host is competitions ourselves. So the officers, we make winter competitions and spring competitions, and we make all the questions, and they're very interesting, and they're a lot more fun than just biology questions. And then also we participate in Toronto exam and of course USABO itself. And to pass on the officer roles to the next year of officers, we do a majority vote where anyone who wants to run for a position has to give a guest lecture. And it can be on any topic that's not something from USABO, so any interesting topic. We do psychotic disorders, we do anything related to mental health. So we do a lot of stuff that's biology related, but not really the core biology stuff. And we also have, this is where the collaboration part comes into play, we have a Discord server, and that's really where we all communicate with each other, and we announce most of our events coming up. And I think that is something that we did new this year, and that has really helped to make it a lot more motivating because you see all your peers working together instead of just everyone studying on their own and competing against each other. I think that's most of the activities that we do. Some of them are new this year, but I think we're adapting to the whole COVID situation, and it's been working out pretty well so far.
Thank you so much, Isra, and we will be able to hear from their club again very, very soon. So we can also look forward to that. And before we get into the whole sharing our experiences, which is similar to what they did, but we can hear a little bit more. Before we get into that segment, I would like to just quickly go over this resources page on the USABO Club website, which is the Student Corner. And you're able to access this both before and after registering an account. Here you can find a list of clubs around the nation. You will also be able to see suggested studying resources from both the USABO itself, and also they linked a lot of things from that past finalists and past IBO contestants have suggested. So we really encourage you to go take a look there because you will be able to find many great resources to help with both your studying and help with your club. So at this time, I would like to formally introduce our first guest speaker, whom you have already heard from earlier. Nitin Parson is an undergraduate at MIT studying computer science and biology, and he was the founder and president of his high school's Biolympiad Club at Clements High School in Texas. Nitin was also a USABO finalist in 2018, 2019, and 2020, and represented the US at the IBO in 2020, winning a gold medal. So Nitin will be talking about some of his experiences and advice in setting up and running a USABO club. So let's welcome Nitin again.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for having me at this webinar, Leanne. So I think what I'd like to start off with is just discussing my motivation for starting the club. So one of the main things that I wanted to do was to introduce the competition that I really enjoyed and introduce my love for biology to the population of my school. I noticed that most people weren't even aware of USABO. That was partly why I started the club. And I think it's probably very similar for a lot of you, especially if you're starting the club, might not have as much of a footing. So really, I think the way that I started off in the first couple of years is to try to sponsor an interest for biology. So it was partly focused on competition preparation, in that I try to prepare lectures for the students that might not have had access to like the same level of like time that I had to study and make all the resources that I had made previously. And I found that there was like a significant amount of interest in my school for biology in general. So I was hoping to translate that into USABO, and I found that it actually worked quite well. Our participation shot up dramatically. I think that was just partly because once people knew that the competition existed, it was a lot easier for people to register and to actually succeed. It's also really good to have a centralized source of information. It really streamlines the registration process, helps to clarify questions, because otherwise people can mess it up or something like that. As far as the officer, so the way that I structured the club was, so I was mainly focused on content, trying to deliver engaging lectures was my main objective. So I started off creating the first set of lectures for the year. So I kind of just looked at the USABO breakdown and then decided on a schedule for lectures for the rest of the year. And I made the first couple lectures. What I wanted with my officer team was for people who could support me in that, of creating engaging lectures with like lots of questions and kind of the USABO style of the thinking, which is really focused on problem solving. And so my two main officers were really just focused on creating content. So I think I called them like teaching coordinators or something, and they were in charge of making lectures when I was not making lectures, and also delivering lectures. And then I had some people that were involved in logistical things. So the website is like relatively important. So you're going to want someone who can create a website so that people can find you in the first place. And then you're going to want someone who can sort of take care of all the other logistical things like registration deadlines. If there's other competitions other than USABO, then you might want to have people on that, like in charge of getting emails, like those sorts of things, someone else for that role. So that's probably how I would recommend structuring it. Just, but it all depends on how you're going to do your club individually. So if you're really focused on biology related activities, like let's say like volunteering at like, I don't know, at a arboretum or something, and you could have someone that's focused on outreach. So there's lots of different ways that you can structure this that sort of go hand in hand with the goals. So as far as motivation, I think I was able to speak personally to a lot of students in, I guess, some of my main reasons for doing biology in general, which is, I think it's really just about like how much of charisma you have when you're explaining, the subject. And because I guess like it's definitely true. I remember seeing a question about this, like if you're just teaching content, how do you make people not think the club is just like very dry? Because I mean, kids are in lecture all day. They're not going to just want to come for another hour and a half lecture or something. So I think the way that you really want to do it is when you're lecturing, you really have to think about how you want to present content in a way that is genuinely engaging and not just verbatim reading off slides or just information that you could see out of a textbook, because you need to have a reason for people to go to your lecture over just a textbook. So the way that I did that was I really tried to get people to think. And the best way to do that is with problems, and that's what I try to find. So I'd have people like try to solve problems in groups, or just like give people some time to like suggest a hard problem that helps explain a really, really interesting concept. And then I would have people like struggle with that problem for a bit, and then I would go through and explain the concept, and that like helps set up the next sequence of topics in the lecture. So I think that's like one of my recommendations is if you don't want to make something boring, then you really have to try very hard to make the content engaging. So that's pretty much all I have. If anyone has any questions for me, happy to answer them at the end.
Thank you, Nathan, for talk. I think that was very, very helpful. So yes, as he said, if you have any questions, drop them in the Q&A box if you want to direct it towards him, and then he can answer them at the end all together in the Q&A section. And I did notice that Nathan has been responding to a few questions, so that's very nice. Thank you, Nathan. All right, so next we will be having, So next we will have Bhavya Gururu from Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology in Virginia. And Bhavya and Isra, who we heard from earlier, are the captains of the Biolympiad Club at their school. And this club has been successful in not only having numerous winners at the competition, but also have many engaging activities. So let's welcome Bhavya.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Lan, for the opportunity. And so, as Lan just said, my name is Bhavya. I'm one of the captains at RTJ. And so Biolympiad at our school was actually founded in 2013. So both Isra and I are we weren't the original founders, but we're still on the current officer staff. And so since then, we've accomplished a lot. We're currently one of the biggest bio clubs at TJ, and we always set like a couple of semifinalists each year and even a top 20. So for example, last year we did have like 1 or 2 people go into top 20. And so kind of about our club location environment, we always hold our club meetings at school. And so we usually have club meeting periods built into our schedules, and we hold our meetings like Friday afternoons. But of course, this can be like flexible for anyone. And I know that some schools, for example, they don't necessarily host it at school or during school. Like some people do host it at library, like rec centers. So whatever works best for you guys, like go ahead and proceed with that, of course. And usually we have around like 70 to 80 signups, but that's also because like once you like incentivize people, like it might be a hard beginning to draw on people, but once you give like some incentives about like what the club does, and like for example at our club, what I did last year as one of the previous officers was I introduced question of the week. And so what we did is with each lecture we always release like a set of questions. And so this is what I ran on for my platform, but I was suggesting that if you give like the more questions and engagement you provide for students that are returning, you can incentivize them to have like another source of motivation. So specifically for question of the week, we release a set of questions with our presentations. And so later on when we have our own website, and we would release like a leaderboard. And so we would say like these people are on this leaderboard, and they're like, and once you see those names, especially like your own name, you feel motivated to keep studying. Or if you like a peer sees it, they might feel motivated because they want to pursue that as well. So that's just like one way you guys can use to motivate yourselves. And our environment, we strive to keep it friendly. Obviously this exam is very competitive, but we can all learn from each other. And so we always motivate others like to study with each other. As Isra said before, we have a Discord server, and we're trying to do study sessions with each other. And in the past we've had after school meetings, and we're also moving to have Discord study sessions. So that's like another way you guys can keep it engaging for everyone. And during club meetings, what we usually like to do at the beginning is like give it like a couple like announcements. Maybe like there's a competition coming up. Like if USABO like next week, like what to bring, what not to bring, or like some reminders about if we have like a school competition coming up, things like that. And we move into our lectures. And during our lectures, we do keep like a general presentation. We also like to keep it engaging, as I said before. We like to include Kahoots, we include this question of the weeks. And sometimes we find it helpful to give handouts and summaries, because some students do like to take notes on their own, but others might find it better to like listen to the presentation and absorb the information. And for those students, it's helpful to have those handouts of like summary sheets. And at the end of the session, we like to kind of wrap it up and also like get to know each other with a couple of like fun questions, so we are able to discuss questions as a club as a whole. And sometimes what can happen is you may not be able to host it all at once. And so an alternative to this is having a virtual setting. And so sometimes, for example, last year we had COVID, but we still held our meetings online through Google Meets. So even if you can't have like a physical environment, do consider like holding like Zoom meetings like these, or even Google Meets. And regarding our club structure, we have 2 co-captains. And what we usually do is we kind of make sure the logistics are running smoothly, keep in touch with our sponsor, because at our school we're required to have sponsors. But these sponsors can also help with signing up for competitions, so like the USABO exam, Toronto exam, and also hosting our own competition at school. We also have our teaching coordinators, as Nathan said before, and they help with developing lectures and developing those questions of the week. We also have a webmaster, and what they usually do is they maintain our website, but they're also in charge of maintaining your leaderboard and managing social media posts so that people are updated on what we've covered and also have access to our lectures in case they weren't able to come. And finally, we also have our treasurer. And so as you guys start to expand, you'll notice that sometimes if you go to other competitions, it may not be free. So in these cases, it can be useful to have a treasurer, and they'll be managing the club's finances, and they may even start doing fundraisers. The fundraisers before COVID, of course, we used to have like bake sales, or we had like fundraiser nights. And another suggestion is have merch. Merch can not also can it like expand like your finances, but it can also incentivize people. Like nowadays, a lot of people are, if you have like a really nice design piece of merch, people will still purchase it. And that can really generate interest, especially when like people are wearing your club merch around. That's one thing to keep in mind. And my general advice is when you're first starting, it may seem like a lot to do, but it's really good. Don't give up. Like, I know that's going to sound cheesy, but like make sure to persevere. And even if you encounter any obstacles, once you make it through, you guys will not regret it. Like, it's a really good opportunity, and I hope you guys pursue it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fabia. That was very inspirational, and we will be able. If you have any questions for the Thomas Jefferson co-captains, just drop them in the Q&A box. Like, I think a lot of people have been dropping some questions, and then we will be able to get to them very soon. And we will be getting to them after our last speech, which we will be hearing from Shaya, the president of Biolympiad Club at Portola High School in California. So let's welcome Shaya.
Okay. Hi, first of all, thank you so much for having me. So just to reintroduce myself again, I'm Shreya and I'm president of the Biolympiad Club at PHS. So for my background in USABO, I'm also a USABO semifinalist, and we have other semifinalists who have done really well in our school as well. So I'm just going to talk like pretty briefly about what we do for like club activities. So for our club in particular, besides getting everybody registered for the test, our main goal is to prepare them for the test. So in that like sense, I'm just going to talk about what we do. So something that I found really helpful and other club members have found really helpful is that we've done in the past is we have a Google Classroom, and we consolidate a lot of resources on there. Like we have the whole online Campbell and Reese textbook on there. We have study guides on there. We have tests on there. So a lot of members have said that's been really helpful to them in the past. So I would definitely advise you do that. So some of the club activities that we do is to prepare our members is at the very beginning of the year, we'll have like a diagnostic test. And this is just to like, so people know where they are. It's not at all an entrance exam or anything like that. It's just so people know what to study. Throughout the year, we do a lot of review activities. Like we do a lot of Kahoots, we do a lot of GimKit, Gizmos, we do things like that. We have, we do a lot of things like that. Sometimes we'll give out presentations. So I know last year we gave a presentation on PCR and other lab things that it would be hard to study otherwise. As the test gets closer and you go into like January, February, things like that, what we do is we do a lot more practice tests. And unlike the diagnostic test, which is what the members tend to write the questions, the board members and administer it, we actually take real tests from the USABO website, and we give them to our members, and they take them. We proctor them, and we also grade them, and we give them their scores back. And we try to go over the test as a club later, and that helps people prepare. Just a tip for that, I know that a lot of tests right now are already accessible. So what we try to do is we try to get the more recent tests. Like I know that on the USABO website, which only teachers have access to, they have the most recent tests. So as the day comes nearer, we just, we ask our advisor to print that test out for us, and we administer it to them. And because normally the more recent tests reflects what's going to be on the test this year. So that's normally how we prepare our members for the club. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shreya. I think we really learned a lot. So I think we can see there's lots of different types of clubs. Like there's club seems to be more lecture focused, and then the other clubs are very focused on activities and practice. So you can consider that when you are formulating your own club activities. So at this time, we can actually start welcoming any questions that you have. I see there's a few already in the Q&A box, and Nathan and Israel has been answering some of them. But the first two questions, actually, if Mrs. Frame, you're okay with answering them, is can a student nonprofit organization start a club and participate, or is it possible to test without a school? So Mrs. Frame, I think that might be more appropriate for you to answer.
Okay, you do need to have a high school, all right, or of some sort, all right, and we do have some testing centers across the United States. That takes a lot of organization to do that, but you could start a club if you had one of those, but it has to be a high school that registers for the exam itself, and that's where the club is usually held, is within the high school itself. And if that's not sufficient, Chelsea, let me know. I'm glad to answer anything else offline.
Okay, so thank you, Mrs. Frame. And then we have another question. So do you have any resources or tips regarding sorting past USABO questions by topic? Any of the panelists wanted to add on to this question?
Well, personally, like for some tests, like some practice tests that we administer, we just write the questions ourselves. So that like kind of, it sorts itself almost, but we've never really gone through and like actually like sorted out tests like that before. So I don't know if that helps, but yeah.
But I actually think that's a great idea to sort questions by topic. If your club members would like that, then I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah, just to add on to that, in our club, like I mentioned, after school, we kind of go over tests usually. What we found helpful is actually sorting it yourself makes you understand it better. So there's like 50 chapters or 55 chapters in Campbell, and we kind of just write down the chapter that it's from. And when you're studying, Campbell is organized by unit, right? And so when we're studying, we kind of just take all the questions that are from chapters 1 through 5 and group them together and kind of do that yourself. And I think being able to sort it yourself makes sure that you're actually understanding it. But yeah, that is a good question. I wish someone did that too.
Okay, so hopefully that answered your question. Thank you so much for sending it in. It's a very good question. And the next question is for Nathan. Can you tell us more about how you became a USABO finalist for 3 years? So if you wanted to talk a bit.
Yeah, I think, well, I guess the process would differ for everyone, but so I started studying and I just found that it was very easy for me to study just because I really enjoyed the content. So I think like part of the reason was just like, if you really like what you're doing and you're really engaged by what you're learning, then it's a lot easier to study than if you have to like struggle through it. But yeah, there was this huge time commitment. I'd say like one of the main things that I was fortunate was since I was doing this my sophomore year, I had a lot of time to prepare versus if I was doing it in my junior year where I'd be significantly more busy. So I think really it's just a factor of two things, time and my interest in the subject. So if it wasn't for those, it definitely would have happened. But I would say it's just those two.
Of course. Thank you so much, Nathan. And thank you for the question. Hopefully it's great motivation for everyone. And another question, next question from Isabel. Is there a good place to find previous USABO questions and question explanations? So maybe I think if anyone wants to answer this.
I can do a little answer on that.
Yeah,
we don't have the explanations associated with the questions that are online. That doesn't mean that we don't have the support activity. That started, it was in like 2012 that I started providing what I called a commentary or support activity, and we go down with each response of why it was correct or why it wasn't correct, all right? And I guess my goal would be to try and provide that information to you eventually. That'll take a little bit of time, but I can do that, okay?
Okay, Yeah, so thank you, Mrs. Frame. Yeah, that was a very great question. I know some people benefit from that. So, all right, so our next question is, what do you recommend if you notice a lot of people in your school aren't too interested in devoting time to such a competitive exam? The USABO was offered at my school one year and not that many people took it up. Does anyone have anything to say about this one?
I think I can take that one. At our school, I mean, TJ is already a STEM school, so obviously we have a lot of people who are already interested in biology. But one thing I think you can do is initially make it less focused on specifically USABO and just make it a biology club and cover just interesting biology topics. And when you see more members start participating and more people start coming to the club, then you can start gearing it more towards preparing for the USABO exam and a little bit more in-depth biology. But at first, I think just make it something that just the general public can come to. It doesn't have to be someone who's very devoted to biology.
Feel free if any of the panelists wanted to add on.
And to add on to that, another thing we do with TJ is like when looking at those numbers, like from 9,000 to 600 in the top 20, it can be very intimidating. So TJ, what we like to do is have those like in-house competitions. So the officers themselves, like we write like our USABO style questions. So not only is it a good like practice for us, but also for students, like they're not competing against the entire country in that case. They're just like having like a friendly competition at school. And it's kind of a chance for them to practice and know what their knowledge is. Another thing kind of is like the leaderboard, like having your name on there just to like see how you are competing with friends, for example. Like this can be like similar to like video games or like Kahoot rankings, for example, like having a little prize at the end. So for our leaderboard rankings, what we do like every quarter, we do like top 3 get like a gift card to the store. And for our competitions, we also give out prizes. So having little events just within your club can also help attract members.
That's very good. Did anyone else wanted to add on to this one? Okay. Well, thank you so much for the question. So that was a very great question. Our next question is, where do we register to take the open exam for the USABO? I can just quickly answer this one. This one, you can find it on their website. I'll go back to the registration slide. But oh, sorry. So actually the link right here is for the resource center, but if you just take the beginning part up to the .org, that is the main page. Then you scroll down and then there will be a registration box. So that way you can register for the exam. Okay. And our next question is, do the USABO ID numbers change every year? And if so, who do I contact in order to rectify any issues regarding ID number verification? Maybe Mrs. Frame can answer this one.
Yeah, they change every year. All right. If you take a look at the number that you have, the first 3 digits indicate the year of the competition. So this year is 122. Last year was 121. The next 4 digits indicate your school. So if it's I think TJ's is 0195. All right. And then the next one is whatever student registers first, 201, 202, 203. All right. And that's how we keep track of them in the database. And when you have a question about a past score, it really is helpful if you provide that ID number. We can find it much more quickly.
Okay, thank you. And our next question is a USABO Club required to take the test?
No, it's not. Just find it extremely helpful.
Yeah, it's a great community. And the next question is very similar. So and another one is, how do I get more members interested in the USABO? Everyone in my school is intimidated by the difficulty of the questions. Okay, so I actually think we had a previous question very similar to this. So
May I add something too?
yeah, of course.
If you go on the student corner, there are articles by past IBO finalists and such. I suggest you read Becky Shee's essay. She competed as a sophomore, didn't make it her junior year. All right. Never thought she had an opportunity. In her senior year, she competed. She ended up being the #1 student in the world that year. So it is always possible. always possible. And she's an inspiration, as are each of you.
Thank you. All right, so by the way, if you did ask a question but you don't see it, it might have already been answered by one of the panelists here, so you can take a look if it has an answer. So our next question is, for studying for USABO, when you understand the concepts, where is the best resources to practice for USABO practice tests and questions, etc.? If any of the panelists wanted to take the question.
So what was the question? I can take
Yeah,
one more
so
question.
when you've understood the concepts, where is the best resources to practice USABO practice tests and questions?
On like you could ask your teacher. I think the teachers have access to all the past tests, so I would start there. I think that's like a really good starting place. I mean, there's like 20-30 hours worth of tests, so at least a couple thousand questions. After that, there's a lot of textbooks that I think have problems that are similar, but I would say USABO previous tests in the recent years are definitely the best resource. So like anything from 2015, 2014 onward is probably a pretty good representation.
Okay, did anyone want to add on to that one? Okay, so someone did ask if you, to repeat the first part. I think Nathan just mentioned that you can ask your teacher in their account, they can find the past tests. Okay, and our next question is, what dues, I'm assuming like club fees, do you have for your clubs? I don't want to deter any members with dues, so I'm unsure whether dues are necessary.
So at TJ, I hope it's okay if I'm answering this question, but at TJ, we don't really have club dues. So yeah, so in general, we usually have like anyone's welcome to come visit our club. So there's not really any club dues. And for USABO, I'm pretty sure it's free for us. Like, and as you register as a school, you don't have to charge anything. But sometimes if there are like outside competitions, like I remember our freshman year, Israel and I think it was Toronto, we were planning on going there, and we did have to pay club dues then. But it was more like paying to compete as part of the competition, but not necessarily related directly to the club. So hopefully that helps.
All right, thank you. Anyone wanted to add on regarding club fees? Okay, so thank you for that question. It's a very great question. Our next question is, this might be Mrs. Frey might be able to answer this. My school registered a few years ago, but the teacher account is now inactive. Does he need to re-register the school?
The teacher does need to re-register, all right, but the school itself will be in the database in that drop-down menu. So the teacher will select that school and then just fill in their current information and it'll be fine.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Frame. And the next question is also about the ID number. Do my accomplishments transfer when I get a different USABO number?
I'm not sure what they mean, do my accomplishments transfer? We know who the student is, right? So we can keep track of whether they're in you know, a semifinal status, and we didn't mention it, but this year, the open exam, we are going to be providing not only the semifinal, but honorable mention and certificate of participation, which you've always done, but other awards for students of recognition. So all of those are keyed in by their record, and that's all kept, so you don't have to worry about that being transferred.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Frame. And our next question is, so do I need to ask the sponsor or advisor to register all students first before we get our IDs and passports?
No. The registration, the teacher could register, and then each of you could register after the teacher has, or you can register before, as long as you know that teacher is going to register your school and pay the registration fee. If the teacher wants to register every student, that's a possibility for them. That's a lot of extra work because students can do it themselves and save a lot of time.
Okay, thank you. And the next question is the textbook, the Neocampa 8th edition biology book. So
So right now,
panelists?
that's one they're using, even with the IBO. And it hasn't changed that much throughout the years.
All right. Okay, thank you, Mrs. Frame. And so it seems like Nathan will be heading out now. So if you had any questions, I'll bring up the contacts list at the end. If you have any questions, feel free to send him an email. Nathan's very, very kind. He always answers any questions. So thank you, Nathan, for coming today.
Thanks so much, Leanne.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, okay, bye. So we can continue with a few more questions since we would like to answer all of them. Our next question is there a page on the USABO website with club info? So there is a page on this. It will be under the Student Resource Center, which I showed earlier. If you just go to Student Resource Center and drop down, there's a few pages on the club information. So you can take a look over there and you should be able to find it. And then our next question is, do we take the test at school or can we take it at home and be on a virtual meeting with the teacher?
That's all going to depend on the teacher, all right, and your school system. It is going to be online this year through ALPS, both the open and the semifinal, but it varies by school, whatever your school guidelines are. Some of them are going all in person, some are going hybrid, some are going virtual. So it's your school.
Right, okay. Yeah, so it seems like it depends on the school. So someone did ask if the Q&A could be saved and they could take a look at it later. So Mrs. Frame, do you think
That
would be
I don't know.
All right.
But
I think
as long as you've said the question and given the answer, it's in the recording.
Okay. Right, so we can they will be in the recording if it was said out loud. And let's see, our next question is, so my teacher is able to be an advisor and support the club activities, but is unable to proctor the exam itself. Is there any way to resolve this?
Usually what they do is they find an alternate, either a staff member or another teacher that can proctor the exam in their place.
Okay, so I think we can take a look at some of the answered questions since we can all contribute to all the panelists can contribute to some of these questions. So we can take a look here. One question is, what grade is recommended to start the club?
9th,
Oh,
as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
so our club was like Bhavya said, founded in 2013. So we didn't have to start the club, but I joined our club 9th grade and I just started in 9th grade. And so slowly I went 9th, 10th, and then 11th grade, I was an officer. I was treasurer, and then 12th grade, I became captain. And so I'd say join as soon as you can. If you're talking about starting a club, like founding it, I think 9th grade when you're a freshman at high school might be hard because you're just getting used to your new high school. So I think I agree with Nitin what he said. Sophomore year would be a good time to start that.
Leanne, when did you start yours?
I started it in my sophomore year and there was no club previously.
Yeah.
So I started myself. I did start planning it in freshman year though. So since starting a club does take some planning beforehand, and then we officially started in my beginning of sophomore year. Yep.
I just want to add to that, if that's okay. But,
yeah, of course.
Sorry, but different schools will have like a lot of paperwork. So for example, at our school, we have to get like a certain amount of signatures. We have to get like teacher approval. We have to like make a club constitution and things like that. And even once you get all the paperwork, you have to send it to the board, get it approved. That usually takes a couple of months. So I would suggest what Leanne did, like, even though you might not found it your freshman year, definitely start, like, even if it's just a little bit, like opening the documents, start filling them out, just start it freshman year. And a huge part of that is finding a sponsor. Like at TJ, for example, finding a teacher sponsor can be tough. And this can vary around schools. Just starting it earlier can be really beneficial. So just wanted to add that.
Yeah. Okay, so I think another great question here is how do you recruit co-captains or I guess office members when you start the club? Are co-captains usually decided before the club starts, or is it better to start the club yourself and vote once the club starts? So I think this is referring to like when it's first being founded. And if anyone wanted to just like, I think if anyone wanted to just contribute in general about officers and board members, we can talk about this one too.
So the way we do it for our club is, I think, a little bit different than like what some of the other clubs do. So last year we don't really hold elections. Last year I was an underclassmen representative and I had to apply for that position. And what they did is people applied and they like wrote out like why they deserved it, and then the club captains like just chose someone. So I think we're probably gonna do something similar this year. So I think it just depends on the club.
Right, yeah. So with my club specifically, our club specifically, we at first it's very important to choose people you know you can work well with and who are going to be dedicated to the club, because there's going to be a lot of things going on and you don't want to have officers who might not be able to devote that much time. So yes, so you can ask your friends if you know they will be able to devote, and you can also ask people like I think Nathan answered here, some people you know who have experience or will be able to work well with you. And some schools, like our school, they do require that you have the officers already ready when you apply as a club to the school. So I think it also, yeah, it really depends on your school. If your school requires that you already have a board before you apply as a club. Okay. Anyone else wanted to add on?
So one thing I recommend is when you're first starting the club, we're required to have like a co-captain or co-president, but we don't have to select the board. So usually when we're selecting the board, I'm also working on developing a club at our school, but a highly recommended thing we do is give out applications, as Shreya was just saying, and like assess like what are people's strengths and abilities, what their past experiences are. It's not a bad thing to have friends, but sometimes what can happen is people get a little bit too comfortable and you may not be able to complete the tasks you'd like to get done. So keep that in mind. And moving forward, like for like continuing the club and things like that, some clubs, what they also like to do is that for like the major positions, captain, president, they might be electing them. But then for like, or they might do application based or like TC application based, but for like the kind of more logistical positions like webmaster or treasurer, even like social media, like a publicist, for example, what they generally do is restrict those positions to underclassmen. So then even once you graduate, you make sure there's like a legacy of the club that's maintained. And so what they usually do for those positions are like doing election based. So they know that the people will still be invested in coming back to the club.
Okay, so looking at the time, I think we can just maybe just have a few last questions. So just a few logistics questions, maybe for Mrs. Frame. What happens if my school doesn't agree to putting a club, or like, can I compete through another school?
You can compete through another school. You need to notify the USABO that you are going to be competing through that school, because you will become part of that school's competition team. So you lose the claim of your school. For example, if it's Otto Eldred High School, all right, that you're participating in, but it's Port Allegheny High School that is going to host you. You are recognized as a Port Allegheny student because that particular school has hosted you, paid the registration fee, proctored, all of that.
Yep, so I think that is pretty much it. So I know there are a few more questions that we didn't get to, but yes, there will be a recording, and here are all of our contact information. So if you do have any questions that we didn't get to today, or you have further questions later, feel free to take a screenshot of this, and you can contact us through our club emails. And I think most of us, we're the presidents are the ones who manage the emails. So, or just a board member will be managing the emails. So feel free to send in an email, questions, and we will be able to get back to you to the best of our abilities. But thank you so much to our speakers today, Nathan, Shreya, Isra, Bhavya, and thank you, Mrs. Frame, for making all of this possible today.
And special thanks to you, Leanne, for all of your hard work and organizing all of this. Congratulations.
Yeah, Thank you. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact the emails listed here. But that is the end of the webinar today, and I hope everyone learned a lot.